You know, it is genuinely fascinating to just stop and look around at the world you and I are navigating right now in 2026.
Oh, totally. It's moving so fast.
Right, right. Like if you reach into your pocket right now and pull out your smartphone, you are instantly holding a piece of technology that can capture reality in ultra HD, like 4K resolution right in your hand.
Yeah, and it's not even just the resolution anymore, you know?
No, not at all. It's the computational photography algorithms inside these things. They're so incredibly aggressive now.
They really are. They're doing so much work behind the scenes.
I mean, they automatically color correct the sky, so it's this perfect shade of blue. They balance the shadows so nothing is too dark. They airbrush out blemishes, and they fake that shallow depth of field, all before you even press the button.
Exactly. We are just absolutely saturated in this hyper-curated, perfectly engineered digital perfection everywhere we look.
Yeah, every billboard, every video you stream, it is all just mathematically flawless.
Mathematical is definitely the perfect word for it. It's completely calculated. We've basically spent the better part of the last 2 decades in this technological arms race.
Right, trying to eliminate every conceivable flaw from our pictures.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted sharper lenses, we wanted bigger sensors, and noise reduction software that just smooths out everything.
And because of that saturation, there's been this massive underlying expectation, especially for the biggest, most monumental days of your life.
You're talking about wedding days, right?
Oh, specifically wedding days. You expect them to be captured with that exact same level of sterile, calculated perfection.
Right, you expect the towering artificial lighting rigs,
Yeah.
the drones buzzing overhead.
Exactly. You expect megapixel counts that could literally let you zoom in on a single thread of the wedding dress from like 50 yards away.
Yeah.
That has been the gold standard.
But, and this is where the source material we have today gets really interesting, couples are suddenly pushing back against that.
Massively pushing back. For the biggest day of their lives, a huge wave of couples are taking all of that high-tech, multi-thousand-dollar perfection, and they are intentionally throwing it right out the window.
They aren't just ignoring it either. It is a full-scale, deliberate rebellion.
It really is. And what's replacing it is something that, honestly, if you told a professional wedding planner 10 years ago that this would be the defining trend of 2026,
They would have laughed you right out of the room.
seriously, they'd think you were joking. Because we are seeing a complete pivot away from the ultra-crisp digital sensor.
We're talking about the explosive resurgence of the disposable camera.
Yes. The complete takeover of the old-school analog film aesthetic at modern weddings. It is all about intentionally downgrading the technical quality of the image.
Right, to capture something else entirely. It's about embracing the beautifully imperfect.
And that is exactly what our mission is for today's deep dive. We are going to unpack exactly why this deeply nostalgic trend is absolutely booming right now.
Yeah, we really need to look at the psychology and the chemistry behind it.
Definitely. And we'll talk about how you can practically integrate these little plastic cameras into an event without courting absolute disaster, because it can go wrong.
Oh, it can go very wrong.
And crucially, we are going to look at a specific tool mentioned heavily in our sources. It's a platform called Weddizer. We're going to see how people are using it to find the professional guidance they need to actually pull this highly specific aesthetic off.
Because pulling this off is definitively not as simple as just buying a cardboard box of cameras from a pharmacy, tossing them on a table and crossing your fingers.
Right. There's a massive logistical challenge here.
But what's fascinating to me is the underlying cultural shift this represents. When I look at the data, this isn't just some quirky photo.
Oh, they aren't just trying to be ironic for a weekend.
Exactly. It's not irony. It is a fundamental reaction to that sterile perfection you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, because when every single photo we see online is filtered and face-tuned.
And computationally enhanced to within an inch of its life, perfection actually loses its currency.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. It becomes cheap.
It becomes cheap and alienating. So this pivot back to film signals a very deep, very real desire for raw, emotional authenticity.
People don't want a wedding album that looks like a high-end magazine editorial anymore.
Right. They want a tangible record of how the day actually felt.
Okay, well, let's unpack that aesthetic first, because before we can figure out the logistics of how to successfully pull this trend off, we need to understand exactly what it is we are looking at.
Yeah, let's get into the visual details.
And I have to admit, I have some skepticism here. Like, why on earth are people paying good money to intentionally ask for lower image quality?
Well, according to the data we are looking at, the old-school film aesthetic is defined by a very specific set of characteristics.
Right, we are looking at heavy, visible, grainy textures.
Exactly. And light leaks. Slight blur, motion, warm tones, muddy shadows.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second. Historically, a light leak meant your camera was technically broken, right? It was letting stray light hit the film.
Yeah, it was considered a physical defect.
So it was a mistake. Why are people trying to replicate a mechanical failure?
That is a great question. And to understand why, we have to look at the mechanism of how a light leak actually happens.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, in a cheap disposable camera, or even an old, heavily used 35mm film camera, the seals around the plastic body aren't mathematically perfect.
Because they're mass-produced plastic.
Right. So when the sunlight hits the camera at a very specific angle, a stray photon of light slips through a microscopic crack in the plastic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it burns directly onto the chemical surface of the film negative. Now, in the 1990s, yes, that was super annoying.
Because it ruined your family vacation photo.
Exactly.
Okay.
But today, that light leak is entirely unpredictable. You cannot program it. It happens because of the physical reality of the environment at that exact fraction of a second.
So it's completely unique.
Yes. That streak of orange or red burning across the edge of the frame isn't just a mistake anymore. It's a fingerprint.
A fingerprint. I like that.
It means that specific beam of light entered that specific plastic camera held by that specific guest at that exact moment in time. It will never, ever be replicated again.
That makes a lot of sense. In a world where AI can generate a perfect sunset on command, people are desperate for proof that something actually physically happened.
Precisely. They want evidence of reality.
Okay, that changes my perspective completely. The light leak is a fingerprint of reality. That actually reminds me of an analogy, but I want to take it a step further to explain why we feel this way.
Go for it.
Imagine digital photography is like a sterile, brightly lit hospital room.
Okay, I can see that.
It is technically perfect, it is impeccably clean, and you can see every single detail with absolute clinical clarity. And the reason it feels that way is mechanical.
Right, because of the sensor.
Yeah. A digital sensor is a rigid grid of millions of square pixels. When it takes a photo, algorithms aggressively sharpen the edges of those pixels to make the image crisp. It is a mathematical grid.
It's very rigid.
But film photography. Film is like a dimly lit, warm cabin in the woods with a crackling fire. It's a little messy, there are shadows in the corners, dust in the air.
I love that comparison.
And mechanically, the reason it feels like that is because film isn't a grid of pixels. It is a physical piece of plastic coated in a gelatin suspension of silver halide crystals.
Exactly, the silver halide.
Right. And those microscopic crystals are scattered completely randomly. They aren't in a rigid grid at all.
No, they're entirely organic in their layout.
So when light hits them, the image forms organically. The edges blend naturally. The grain you see isn't digital noise. It is the actual physical shadow of those crystals.
So the image literally has physical texture.
Yes. It feels like the warm cabin. It feels human.
That is precisely the mechanism at play. Digital sharpens while film blends. And if we connect this to the psychology mentioned in our sources, it aligns perfectly with how human memory works.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, the source material uses the phrase authenticity over perfection. It specifically notes that modern couples are shifting away from overly curated albums because they want to capture laughter, chaos, and unexpected beauty.
Laughter and chaos. I love that.
Let's think about how a digital camera handles a chaotic moment. If a couple is spinning on the dance floor, a modern digital camera with a high-speed electronic shutter will freeze them in midair.
It'll be incredibly crisp.
Right. You will see the exact thread count of the groom's jacket and every single sequin on the bride's dress. But the result looks static. It looks like a wax museum.
It's totally frozen in time.
Right. Now, take that exact same moment on an old-school film camera. Because the shutter mechanism is mechanical and often a little slower, and the film itself is less sensitive to light, you are going to get a slight physical blur.
You're going to see the streak of the movement.
Exactly. The faces might be laughing, but they are going to be slightly out of focus. But
Yeah.
here's the crucial psychological part.
What's-
That slightly blurred photo conveys the actual kinetic energy of the moment far better than the frozen, ultra-crisp digital capture.
Wow, yeah. The blur translates to motion in our brains.
And the grain translates to texture. It feels exactly like a memory, because human memory isn't 4K.
No, it's not. Human memory doesn't record thread counts.
Exactly. Human memory is blurry, it's warm, it's impressionistic, and it focuses entirely on emotion.
Memory isn't 4K. That is such a profound way to look at it, because when I think back to the absolute best nights of my life, I don't remember the exact geometrical lines of the room I was in.
No, you remember the feeling.
Right, I remember the warmth, the feeling of the bass in the floor, the blur of the lights. And yet, there is a massive irony sitting right in the middle of this whole trend.
Oh, absolutely, the social media aspect.
Yes. We are talking about a deeply analog, physical, chemical medium. Literally, as you said, light reacting with silver halides on a strip of plastic. But what is the primary engine driving this trend?
It's social media. Yeah. The documentation we have explicitly highlights that this retro vibe is dominating platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. Yeah. We are using the most archaic analog medium possible to create the ultimate scroll-stopping content for digital reels.
How does that even make sense, right?
Yeah, how does that make sense?
It is a wonderful paradox, but it makes complete sense when you analyze it through the lens of the modern attention economy.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, when every other post on a social media feed is a hyper-polished, perfectly lit 60 frames per second digital video, your brain just stops processing it.
We've developed a collective blindness to digital perfection.
Exactly. It's just noise. But when you are doom scrolling and suddenly your thumb hits a photo that has heavy, chaotic grain, a massive yellow light leak burning the corner, and the subjects are slightly blurred and laughing hysterically in a harsh flash,
It completely short-circuits your brain's expectation.
it stops you.
Yeah.
It stands out precisely because it breaks every single visual rule of the digital platform it is being shared on. It provides a visual friction, a texture that our eyes are currently starved for.
Absolutely, we are starved for friction.
So we know we want this messy, authentic, friction-filled vibe. But the logistical nightmare is, how does a couple actually capture that without just firing their professional photographer and hoping for the best?
Yeah, you don't want to just wing it.
Because getting these shots fundamentally changes the role of everyone attending a wedding. According to our sources, the strategy here is integrating disposable cameras directly into the guest experience.
Right, placing 1 or 2 disposable cameras on each reception table.
Exactly. And pairing them with very specific instruction cards. The texts suggest creative signage, things like "capture the night your way" or "no filters, just memories."
This brings us to a concept the industry calls guest engagement. And this is where the trend moves from just a cool visual aesthetic to a functional shift in how a massive event is actually documented.
Right, because traditionally, at a typical wedding, you have a professional photographer.
Maybe a primary and a second shooter, if you have a decent budget. But they are the sole dictatorial arbiters of the visual record.
The guests are entirely passive observers. They're just the subjects of the photos.
But by handing out disposable cameras, you are turning passive observers into active storytellers. You're completely democratizing the documentation process.
Democratizing the record. I mean, it sounds great, but wait, let me play real devil's advocate here for a second, because this sounds incredibly risky.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I'm paying thousands of dollars to host this event, and I put a disposable camera on a table full of my rowdiest college friends who have been at the open bar for 3 hours,
Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
aren't I just going to get 27 exposures of thumbs over the lens, extreme close-ups of half-eaten chicken parmesan, and blurry pictures of the ceiling?
It's a very real possibility.
I mean, democratizing the process sounds very poetic in theory, but guests aren't trained photographers. They don't know the first thing about composition or lighting.
Your concern is completely valid, and it is the exact reason why the source material provides such specific structural advice on how to execute this.
Oh, so planners actually plan for the chaos.
Planners know this pitfall well. You absolutely cannot just leave it entirely to chance. If you just throw cardboard cameras on tables with zero guidance, yes, you will get a very expensive box of thumbs and ceilings.
Right. So what's the fix?
The successful strategy relies on firm direction. You have to build a sandbox for the chaos to play in. The sources suggest assigning dedicated film moments.
Okay, what does that actually look like in practice? Give me the mechanics of a dedicated film moment.
It means you are not just saying, take photos of whatever. You are actively directing the analog experience throughout the timeline of the day.
Oh, I see.
For example, the documentation mentions using film specifically for bridal prep, the first look, and the dance floor chaos.
But wait, you wouldn't hand a cheap disposable camera to a nervous groomsman for the first look, would you?
No, obviously not. You would have the professionals shoot that on professional-grade film, which we'll get to. But for the guests during the reception, the signage you mentioned earlier is the key mechanism.
So you guide them with micro assignments.
You don't just say, have fun. You put a card on table 4 that says, your mission, use this camera to capture the funniest unscripted moment at your table.
Or do not touch this camera until the dancing starts, then pass it around.
Exactly. You are gamifying it. Furthermore, the execution strategy requires something the sources call a dedicated film drop box.
A drop box. That sounds essential.
It is non-negotiable. You need a highly visible, designated, secure place for guests to safely deposit the cameras when they're done.
Because if you don't have a drop box near the exit, those cameras are going home in people's purses.
Or getting left in ride shares. Or literally getting thrown away by the catering staff with the table scraps.
That makes total sense. You invite the chaos, but you provide a rigid framework to contain it. But, even with a drop box, I am still genuinely worried about the physics here.
The physics of the camera.
Yes, because my worry about the thumbs and the ceilings, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Analog photography comes with real, physical, uncompromising limitations that a decade of smartphone use has completely made us forget.
Oh, we've definitely forgotten. We are so used to our phones performing literal miracles in the dark that we forget what actual light and chemistry require.
Let's talk about the pitfalls, because if a couple tries to do this themselves, what could actually go wrong?
A catastrophic amount can go wrong if you don't understand the science of what you are holding. The source material outlines common mistakes to avoid, and they are crucial to internalize.
Okay, what's the first mistake?
The first mistake is simply overusing disposable cameras. There is a temptation to put 5 cameras on every single table to maximize coverage.
Yeah, more cameras, more angles, right?
But if you do that, you are going to end up with hundreds and hundreds of redundant, wasted shots. And remember, you pay for film twice.
Right. Once to buy it and once to chemically develop it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You will pay a fortune in development costs for photos of empty chairs. Balance is absolutely needed.
Got it.
But the second mistake is the most critical one, and it goes directly to your point about physics ignoring lighting conditions.
Yes. Let's get into the mechanics of this, because if I pull out my phone in a dark room right now, it automatically engages night mode.
And it does all the work for you.
Right. The digital sensor takes multiple exposures over 3 seconds, stitches them together, uses AI algorithms to artificially brighten the shadows, reduces the noise, and suddenly a pitch-black room looks like it was shot at high noon.
It's literally software doing the heavy lifting.
Exactly. Digital cameras and phones can artificially manufacture light where there is almost none by amplifying the electrical signal. But let's pause and look at what a disposable camera actually is.
It is a cheap, single-element plastic lens. Contains a piece of film, usually rated at 400 or 800 ISO.
Wait, for those of us who only know the zoom pinch on an iPhone screen, what does jumping to an 800 ISO actually mean in the context of a dark reception hall?
That's a great point of clarification. ISO is the measurement of the film's chemical sensitivity to light.
Okay.
A lower number, like 100 ISO, needs a ton of bright sunlight to create an image, but it produces a very smooth, grain-free photo.
So 100 ISO is for a sunny beach.
Exactly. A higher number, like 400 or 800 ISO, is more chemically sensitive. It can absorb light faster in darker environments.
So you'd want that for indoors.
Right. But the trade-off, and this goes back to our earlier point, is that higher sensitivity inherently means physically larger silver halide crystals on the film.
Oh, and larger crystals mean much heavier, more visible grain in the final image.
Exactly. Most disposable cameras use 400 or 800 ISO to try and give you a fighting chance indoors, but they are still fundamentally limited. They cannot manufacture light.
Yeah.
Film requires actual photons to create a chemical reaction.
And a disposable camera only has that tiny little flash powered by a single AA battery.
Precisely. And this is where the inverse square law of light ruins people's wedding photos.
The inverse square law. Okay, science class. Walk us through it.
It basically says that light falls off incredibly fast the further it travels. If you are in a dimly lit, romantic, mood-lit reception hall, and a guest tries to take a photo of the bride across the dance floor with a disposable camera,
That tiny flash isn't going to reach her, is it?
not even close. That flash is only going to illuminate about 5 to 10 feet in front of the lens. Everything beyond that distance receives zero light.
Wow.
And because the film cannot digitally enhance the shadows, Everything beyond 10 feet will literally just develop as a solid black rectangle.
So relying solely on guests with disposable cameras in a dark room is a recipe for complete photographic disaster.
You will send off a box of cameras to the lab, wait 3 weeks, and get back 300 photos that are 90% black.
A stack of expensive, chemically developed black rectangles, that is terrifying, especially if you relied on that as the primary record of your wedding.
It happens more than you'd think.
And that realization leads directly to the third, and frankly most important mistake to avoid from our sources: not hiring a professional. The disposable cameras must complement, not replace, the professional photographer.
This is the anchor of the entire concept. The disposable cameras on the tables are the garnish. They are the interactive, chaotic, fun element for the guests. But the professional photographer is the main course.
They are the safety net.
Exactly. They ensure that regardless of how many thumbs end up over the disposable lenses or how many black rectangles develop, the actual narrative story of the day is captured beautifully and reliably.
But here is where the trend gets incredibly complicated. If you want this specific, vintage, raw, beautifully imperfect film aesthetic, you cannot just hire any professional wedding photographer.
No, you absolutely cannot.
Right, because if you hire a traditional high-end photographer whose entire portfolio is ultra-crisp, heavily artificially lit, HDR digital photography,
And then you try to mix in your grainy, muddy, disposable camera shots from the guests.
the final wedding album is going to look completely schizophrenic. The styles will clash horribly. It will look like two completely different events.
It's jarring when you see it done wrong.
So the logistical question becomes, if you absolutely need a professional to act as a safety net, but you need a professional who specifically understands this highly niche, muddy, chaotic, vintage vibe, how do you actually find them? You can't just Google wedding photographer and hope for the best.
And that is exactly where a specific solution presented in the data comes into play. Because the sources strictly warn against ditching the professional, they also provide a roadmap for finding the right one.
Right, and the documentation we are looking at highlights a platform called Weddizer as a central utility for navigating this specific trend.
Weddizer is super interesting. It's essentially built for this.
Let's look at Weddizer objectively, because the data points to this website as essentially a highly specialized matchmaking database for the wedding industry.
Yeah, matchmaking is the perfect way to describe it.
According to the text, the platform isn't just a phone book. It features curated wedding inspiration articles, real wedding showcases, access to professional photographers, and business listings specifically categorized by niche styles.
It essentially tries to act as a funnel. You use their guidance articles in the specific niches to figure out what you want.
Right, and then you use their business directories to find the exact artists who can translate that messy, nostalgic vision into a stunning, cohesive reality.
Yes. Looking at how Weddizer is structured, it operates as a multi-step process of education and connection. And it is vital to note that you still have to vet the portfolios yourself.
You don't just log on to Weddizer and blindly click the first photographer you see in your zip code.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You use the platform's curated inspiration articles to educate yourself on the technical terminology first. You have to learn the vocabulary to ask for what you want.
That makes sense. You have to speak their language.
Then, you use the business listings to aggressively compare portfolios side by side, look at consistency in their styles, and check pricing.
But specifically for this analog trend, the sources suggest you are looking for photographers on Weddizer who specialize in 3 distinct technical areas, right?
Yes. Hybrid photography, film-inspired editing, and documentary-style wedding coverage.
Okay, let's break those 3 technical areas down because those are very distinct approaches to getting this look. First, let's talk about hybrid photography. What does a hybrid shooter actually look like on the ground?
It is honestly the smartest way to execute the trend. A hybrid photographer, as categorized on Weddizer, is a professional who physically shoots on both digital cameras and actual analog film cameras simultaneously throughout the day.
Wow, at the same time.
Yeah. If you watch them work, they will usually have a dual harness. They might use a high-end, silent digital camera for the incredibly fast-paced, critical moments where they absolutely cannot risk missing the shot due to a mechanical error.
Like the ring exchange or the first kiss.
Exactly. But slung over their other shoulder, they will have a medium format film camera or a vintage 35mm camera.
Let me stop you there for a second. What is the difference between a 35mm camera and a medium format camera, just so we have the full picture?
Oh, great distinction. 35mm is the standard small rectangular film size you find in disposable cameras or standard vintage cameras. It's gritty, it's classic.
Okay.
But medium format film is physically much larger. It's a bigger piece of chemistry. Because the negative is larger, it captures light with an incredible creamy depth of field and a much finer grain structure.
While still retaining that organic chemical color profile.
Exactly. So a hybrid shooter will pull out that medium format film camera for the portraits, for the quiet, candid moments, for the artistic establishing shots.
That dual approach is genius. It guarantees you get the absolute safety, speed, and reliability of digital files, alongside the authentic physical texture and chemical color of real film.
It's the best of both worlds.
But that leads to a post-production problem. If half your photos are crisp digital files and half are creamy, grainy analog film scans, how do they make the final album look cohesive?
And that brings us to the second area to look for on Weddizer film-inspired editing.
This is where the post-processing magic happens. How do they distress the digital files to match the film?
This is where the true artistry of a modern photographer lies. The sources list specific techniques these photographers use in software like Lightroom to achieve the perfect film look on a digital sensor.
They have to match the digital files to the physical film scans.
Yes, and they do this through incredibly nuanced color grading. A digital camera naturally wants to capture clinically accurate colors, but film has distinct color shifts.
What do you mean by color shifts?
Well, a film stock like Kodak Portra might lean slightly warm and yellow, while Fuji Pro 400H might lean cooler with magenta shadows. The photographer has to manipulate the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders to mimic those specific chemical imperfections.
So they're essentially applying a highly customized mathematical algorithm to undo the perfection of the digital sensor.
Exactly, and beyond color, they add procedural grain. They map digital noise patterns to mimic the exact physical structure of silver halide crystals.
That's incredible.
But the most crucial technique highlighted in the sources is avoiding over-editing.
Which sounds easy, but I imagine is incredibly hard for a pro to do.
It requires immense restraint. A modern digital photographer is trained to recover every blown-out highlight and brighten every dark shadow because the digital file holds so much data.
Right. They want to save all the information.
But to achieve the film aesthetic, they have to force themselves to let go. They have to look at a photo and say, I'm going to intentionally leave those shadows crushed and muddy.
I'm going to let the bright window in the background blow out completely white.
Exactly. I'm not going to fix it. They have to intentionally distress the digital file.
So when you use a directory like Weddizer to find a photographer who specifically specializes in this, you are finding someone who knows exactly how to color match their digital files to the disposable film scans coming from your guests' tables.
Precisely. The result is that the final album, combining the pro's digital shots, the pro's film shots, and the guest's disposable shots, looks like one cohesive, beautiful, nostalgic story.
It's incredible. It's exactly like buying a brand new, rigid pair of raw denim jeans that have been expertly, meticulously distressed by a designer to look like they've been comfortably worn for 10 years.
That's a perfect analogy.
It takes an incredible amount of technical skill to make something brand new look authentically and beautifully old. And the data suggests platforms like Weddizer are where you locate those specific designers.
Absolutely.
Now, the source material also points out that beyond the technical processing, there are specific photography styles or approaches you can filter for on Weddizer that pair perfectly with this trend. Let's look at those. Number 1, documentary wedding photography.
Yes, the approach is just as important as the processing. Documentary photography, which is sometimes called photojournalism, is an approach entirely focused on capturing real, unscripted moments as they organically unfold.
So the photographer acts as a fly on the wall.
Exactly. They aren't intervening. They aren't stopping the bridal party to ask them to pose in a perfect symmetrical line and smile at the lens.
They are patiently waiting in the corner for the moment when a bridesmaid trips over a shoe, everyone genuinely bursts out laughing, and they capture that unscripted, chaotic reality.
And that style pairs perfectly with the disposable camera aesthetic because the disposable cameras on the tables are inherently documentary.
Right, they capture what is actually happening from the perspective of the crowd, not what is being staged by a director.
Precisely. Now, the second style you can filter for on Weddizer is editorial vintage style.
How did that differ from documentary? Because editorial sounds very posed.
It is slightly different, and it is a bit more directed. This is where the photographer adds a touch of fashion-inspired elegance, but with a nostalgic, almost cinematic twist.
Okay, give me a visual.
Think of an old, glossy spread from a 1990s fashion magazine. The subjects might be slightly posed or directed into a certain light, but the image has mood, It has attitude.
It might feature direct, harsh flash, and it heavily utilizes those warm tones and grainy textures we talked about.
Exactly. It elevates the film look from just being messy guest photos to feeling highly artistic and intentional.
And finally, the third style mentioned is candid lifestyle photography.
Yeah, this seems like a middle ground, focusing on natural emotions and interactions between people, rather than rigid, traditional portraits.
All three of these styles, which the source material indicates you can easily browse, cross-reference, and compare on Weddizer's business listings, are united by one common goal: capturing the feeling of the day, not just the visual data of the day.
And so the major actionable takeaway here for anyone analyzing this data is that you cannot execute this 2026 trend in a vacuum. You cannot just buy the disposable cameras, drop them on the tables, and hope for the best.
Right. By utilizing the guidance articles on a platform like Weddizer to understand the terminology and then actively using their business directories to vet portfolios, you are building a safety net.
You confidently hire an expert who truly understands the assignment. You hire someone who has the restraint not to over-edit the life out of your photos.
But who possesses the technical mastery to ensure that the story of the event is told cohesively and beautifully alongside the chaos of the disposable cameras?
It mitigates the risk entirely.
It bridges the gap between the high concept vision of wanting authentic, messy memories and the practical, logistical reality of needing a professional to navigate the physics of light and film chemistry.
It really does.
So let's step back and look at the massive amount of ground we have covered today on this deep dive.
We've covered a lot.
We really have. We started by examining this widespread underlying societal desire in 2026 to escape the Ultra HD 4K computationally perfected world we live in.
Yeah, that desire for friction.
We explored the actual mechanics and chemistry of the old school film aesthetic, understanding why the physical structure of silver halides, the unpredictability of light leaks, and the natural blur of slower shutter speeds offer a return to something tactile and real.
We looked at the brilliant sociology behind handing guests disposable cameras, using dedicated film moments and drop boxes to turn passive observers into active storytellers.
And we navigated the very real physical and logistical pitfalls of analog photography, understanding ISO, the inverse square law of flashes, and the absolute danger of getting back a box of black rectangles.
Which nobody wants.
And finally, we learned how to anchor this entire risky, beautiful experience by utilizing platforms like Weddizer to find, compare, and hire specialized hybrid or documentary professionals who can seamlessly blend the digital safety net with the analog dream.
It really is a fascinating journey from the societal macro level down to the micro level of planning an event. And if I can offer a final synthesis on all of the data we've reviewed today,
Please do.
this 2026 trend of disposable cameras and film aesthetics isn't just a passing phase. It isn't a superficial Pinterest fad that will be gone in a year.
It's deeper than that.
In a world that is relentlessly hyper-polished, constantly filtered, and endlessly curated by algorithms, choosing to document your most important, vulnerable day with an unpredictable, imperfect medium is a profound statement.
It's a deliberate, conscious return to authentic storytelling and raw emotion.
It is a powerful reminder that the true beauty of our lives doesn't lie in how mathematically flawless we look, but in how deeply and chaotically we feel.
The physical imperfections of film, the blur, the heavy grain, the unpredictable flares of light, they aren't mechanical flaws to be fixed anymore.
No, they are the visual representation of humanity.
That is beautifully said. The physical imperfections of film are the visual representation of humanity. And that leaves me with one final lingering thought for you to ponder as we wrap up today's analysis.
Let's hear it.
If we are now at a point in 2026 where we are paying money and intentionally seeking out blur, grain, and unpredictable light leaks just to make our most important monumental memories feel real and authentic, what does that say about how we might want to capture and remember the everyday, ordinary moments of our lives moving forward?
Oh, that's a great question.
If perfection is alienating on our wedding day, isn't it alienating on a random Tuesday too? Are we going to start wanting the messy, unedited, grainy reality in our daily photos?
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
It is absolutely something to think about the next time you pull your smartphone out of your pocket, wait for the AI to perfectly balance the lighting, and take a picture of your morning coffee. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It has been an absolute pleasure unpacking this fascinating cultural shift with you.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
We will catch you next time.